So previously we've created the grid, we've created a title, and we've created the buttons for filtering the employees. We now want to add in the toolbar, and let's take a look at the completed app to see how that toolbar operates. So the toolbar, when you first enter into this page, you only see the add button, but when you click on an employee, you will then see the edit and the transfer. And it is context sensitive, so if a person clicks on an item within this grid and they click the edit button, a dialog box will be opened up with the content loaded in. So we are going to, in this video, create some simple content for these dialogs. What we will be doing is creating them as a dialog rather than as a handle. And inside of these dialogs, these are nothing more than additional modules. So let's take a look now at our source code. Where we left off was that we had simply just the employee management header and the buttons along with the grid, and we're now going to add in a toolbar. And similar to the way we do the rest of the widgets, we create a div tag with a widget of esToolbar. And this will then create basically a series of buttons that we can place horizontally and use. So the way we create those buttons, however, is a little bit different than using a button. We use a list item. And similar to the buttons, we have an on-click event, so that when the user does click on that, they will execute this function. So we have add employee was the first one, and the button text is going to be add. And for this list item, we have on click, and this one will be edit employee, and that will say edit. And then finally we have on click, and that is going to be transfer employee, and the text on that is transfer. Now, as we stated when we first looked at the completed application, the edit and the transfer button do not display initially, so we can set that to display equals false, and we could do the same thing here, display equals false. Only the add will show up. So let's now create those event handlers for the add employee, the edit employee, and the transfer employee. Let's go ahead and come down to the bottom of our module, and we'll do it below the clear filter. So on the add employee, we're going to set that up as a function, and we don't really care about the context in this case as we did with the filters, so we do not have to specify any parameter coming in. And what we're going to really do here is we're going to create a dialog widget. So we use the same esCreate function that we've been using all along, and this time the widget is esDialog. Now we're going to bind that to really the whole page, not a specific location within the page, so we don't really have to define anything here, so we'll just say undefined or null. And then we need to give it some of the options, so dialog options. So just the same way we've been using create all along. So let's now define what those dialog options are. So var dialog opts. Okay, so it's just a standard JavaScript object again. And in these options, what we need to specify is the name of the module that we want to load when that dialog is presented. And we do this through content. So content, and we specify what that is going to be called, so it's HTML, and again we'll do app add employee.htm. And there are some additional options that we can specify with the dialog to make it a little bit more user friendly. So let's do title, and we'll specify that as add employee in this case. We'll do a width because we want to make it a certain size. We don't want it to be too big, so 750 pixels will be fine. The height, let's make that 300. And we have some additional options that we can allow the user to resize them, or we could do some additional ones like how to specify what function to execute when the dialog is closed. But for now, we're just going to say resizable is true. We're going to allow the user to resize and move that dialog around. So there's the basic content for the add employee. Let's do the same thing for the edit and the transfer. Okay, so we'll just rename that, and we'll call this one edit. And so here it's going to be edit employee. The name of the HTML we'll use edit. And then we'll do the same thing for the transfer employee. Okay, and trans for employee. And there are our three clicks, or three buttons that we have in our toolbar, and the click event handlers for those. Now let's create the content for those. So let's say add a new file, app add employee.htm. It is just some basic content, so nothing major here. Let's just do a header 1 of add employee. Let's save that one as edit. And then finally we'll create one for transfer employee. So just some basic content at this point in time. And we'll change the header to transfer. Okay, so we've got the three new modules set up, ready to go. They're just some basic content at this point. We built the on-click event handlers. Now the one piece we still yet have to hook on is the action to take place when the user clicks on a row within the grid, because you notice that we only had the add visible, and then we had the edit and the transfer visible when they clicked on it. So the first thing we need to do is we need to set on this grid the options for making it selectable. So let's do that, selectable, and we'll set that to true. And now once the user can select something within that grid, we need to tell it what function to execute when that occurs. So we do on selected. We want it to run a function called on row select, and we'll go ahead and create that one as well. So we say this dot on row select. Okay. So when that function gets executed on row select, and let's go ahead and put that right up here before the employee. So in this on row select, what we want to take place is we want to show the buttons. So function and context. Okay, so let's just set this up here real quick. Okay, so what we want to do is turn on the two buttons that were initially hidden, and in order to do that we need to make sure that they are available to us in JavaScript, and we can do this in a couple of ways. With the use of context name, we can make the variables or the widgets available to us within JavaScript as a JavaScript object. So we can specify this .btn edit emp, which is the name we will give the edit button, and we'll set the display to true. And then we'll do this .btn transemp, and we'll set the display to true. So now that we have the buttons set up that we want to enable and make them visible, let's go ahead and set their context names to these values that we set up here. And we can do that right here on the list items. So let's do context name equals btn edit emp, and then we do the same thing for context name equals btn transfer emp. So these two buttons now have been specified with a name that we can reference in our JavaScript, even though they're only defined in HTML by the use of this context name. And so when the user clicks on that row, we will then enable those buttons. And when those buttons are enabled and they're visible, if the user clicks on them, they will open up a dialog with some basic content. So let's go ahead and take a look at our application now. And let's go and back to ours. Okay, so we now have the Add Employee button. And if I click on this, it will open up the dialog Add Employee. If I close this down and now click within the row, the edit and the transfer will show up. And again, I can click on those and it will show our basic content of the buttons. And later we will fill in the actual module content. So in our application, we now need to go up to the area that we added the toolbar and the buttons, and let's add in some styles. Now we can do it using the class like we did with the standard buttons, but we can also take advantage of some of the built-in classes for ES Framework like ES Page Toolbar. And this will automatically style the toolbar itself and all the buttons within them using a default theme. Now the other thing we have to add in here is the image, and that will not be part of the style, so this is images, and then we'll do add icon.png, and we'll do the same for the other two edit and transfer buttons. So edit and transfer, this will be edit and transfer. Okay, now I just need to copy in those files, the images that we have. So I've got those prepared and I'll drag them into the images folder. And now if we go back to the application itself and we refresh, we should now have the toolbar styled as well as the buttons, and when you click on them, we now can see the modules that we created. And in the subsequent videos, we'll be creating each one of these modules separately. This concludes part 5 of the Enterprise Services Framework tutorial.